Good evening, everyone. My name is Niamh Brambrick, and I am the Agricultural Science Association President. I'm delighted to welcome you to our Budget 2024 webinar, which is facilitated by IFAC in conjunction with the Irish Farmers Journal and the Agricultural Science Association. The purpose of tonight's webinar is to bring you the latest up-to-date information from Budget 2024, and this will be given by two expert panelists. So we have Marty Murphy, who is Head of Tax with IFAC, and Darren Carty, who is the Sheep and Schemes Editor with the Irish Farmers Journal. Of course, throughout this evening, we welcome interaction from our audience, and you can use the Q&A function that is on your Zoom. Before we kick off to Marty, I suppose a general overview from a young member's point of view from ASA. There's probably minimal in today's budget. I suppose mortgage relief is a small bit to offer our younger members. And then other members within the industry, I suppose the lower rate of tax is going from 40,000 to 42,000. And there's an extension on the BIK of €10,000 with the original market value on cars. I suppose, Marty, I'll come over to you first. So Marty, as I said, is head of IFAC. He's a vast experience in accounting, and Marty is also a chartered accountant as well. So Marty, how do you think the budget's been perceived this evening, I suppose?
Hi Niamh, thanks very much for having me on. I'm the head of tax in IFAC, and effectively I think it's we're in an inflationary time. And effectively, the budget, what it's trying to do is trying to make up for that inflation. We've all seen how hard it is, etc. While we have seen the mortgage interest come through there, it's for extraordinary times, and it's only got a 1 year relief. So there's a lot of okay, we're going to try and do something for you for the next year or two, but a lot of it does leave a certain level of uncertainty there in the pockets there at the end of the day, and it'll be different. It's like everything else. There's a lot of good things that we're seeing coming through. There's also a little bit of changes that are coming through that are maybe not going to be so great that we thought they would be, and all that type of good stuff. So it's very much a mixed bag. And we'll start off anyway with the presentation, and we can start going through and see a little bit of the details around all that type of good stuff and everything else and what we can see ahead of us. Cool. So just bring my little clicker up. So what's it shaping in? So as I said from the start, inflation is going to be a key part of what we're going to be looking through. Again, we're still up against a housing market where there's a lack of supply. There's a lack of money now coming through as well, as we're seeing interest rates going up. We have an energy crisis. We all know that. Climate change is big on the cards. You can see that 50-50 between we need more energy, but at the same time, we need to be protecting our atmosphere. Then we've got education. We've got a lot of supports. The ministers were very clear that they wanted Ireland to be the best place in the world for children to grow up, and we can see that coming through what they're pushing through. So the background: cost of living crisis, the Ukrainian war, energy costs, full unemployment, rising interest rates, stabilization of inflation rates, etc. And we all see that in the news every day. We see it coming through. So first, what are we getting through? We've the increase in the VAT threshold for registration. If anything else, let's just make it a little bit easier for the rest of us to remember the rates. So services, that's accountants like myself, plumbers, plasterers, and all that type of good stuff, won't have to register for VAT now to €40,000. Goods, this is where we're selling stuff and it's going out across a shop counter and etc. 75 to 80,000, nice little round number to remember going forward. The 0% changes, we finally got our ebooks and audiobooks going down to 0%, and the supply of solar panels to schools went to 0%. But all remember last year the 0% on home renovations and things like that went to 0%, but now it's also being offered onto schools, etc. With the extension of the VRT relief for battery electric vehicles at the end of December 2025, so where that effectively is at the moment is on a vehicle with a value of less than 40,000, we're getting 5,000, all that type of good stuff. It gets tapered off towards 50k. As we look, the 9% VAT reduction for gas and electricity is being extended for an additional 12 months. So that's a little bit happy news for everybody. That's going to be a bit of cash in their pockets. The flat rate for farming is going to drop from 5 to 4.8%. It's a rough year to do such a thing, considering that we're looking out in the sector and we can see that basically income's falling. We all know that. We can see it in the milk prices. We can also see on the other side the cost inputs, while stabilising, are still causing a bit of a headache through. So it's a tough cut to be looking at. We've the excise reduction on fuel oil extended and be restored on the 1st of April, etc. Housing tenants and landlords, huge amount of emphasis in the budget for this. With their rent credit, it's been increased. Interestingly enough, we've also had it that it now includes digs. That was the word that we took out of it that was very interesting, because before it had to be a property that was registered with the RTB. So it'll be interesting and look ahead. That's also retrospective. So there might be a lot of people there that have already filed their income tax returns for 22. So it might be a chance now to go back, revise, and get that relief claimed as well. The rented residential relief is also coming through. So this is effectively for the landlords, where if they've got a property that's rented out, basically their 20% threshold, which has gone up to 42,000, which is great, is going to be 3,000 deducted off it, and 20% of that will be removed out. So basically, it's around €600 additional in your pocket if you're a landlord. You have to keep it in the market within the 4 years and all that type of good stuff, and it'll be clawback if you don't. But it will, as time goes on, get higher. You can see it starts at 3, 4, 5, 5, and then out in 27 when the scheme will actually end. Help to Buy scheme has been extended to 31st of December 2025. It's up to 30,000 there to be refunded back. They haven't really extended it to second-hand properties or anything like that. It's not been particularly expected that would happen, but I think a lot of people had hopes out that it might happen. The vacant home has been increased from 3 to 5 times. Again, it's kind of a tough one coming through. A lot of people were kind of hoping that it might be reduced, but no, we're seeing it going for 3 to 5 times. Obviously, this is also the first time it's coming into play, so it's interesting to see how the system is going to move out. We have mortgage interest relief. It's a temporary 1-year mortgage interest relief. Where we're seeing this hugely is basically in the variable rates, as in the back in the day when you managed to get the tracker mortgages. We've seen those massively go up the last year or two. It's nice that there's a bit of relief there. It's unfortunate, though, that it's only going to be 1 year. We'd like to see that go out a little bit further. We can see it's basically to qualify, you have to have a mortgage of between 80 and 500,000 on the 31st of December 2012. And the release in respect of the increased interest on that loan between the calendar year and comparable. So basically, it's not that you have a mortgage, it's that you've had to have had a mortgage last year and that the interest on that mortgage has to have gone up in the current year. And then it's the difference in between that you get the tax relief at 20%. And it's capped there, it's the 1250. On the education side of things, we've got the free school books for junior cycle students at post-primary. There's the restoration of the maintenance grants to postgraduates. There's additional teachers coming through, and there's the extension of the benefit to 18 years old. There's also €1,000 there of deduction for the fees for third level as well. So there's a nice lot of stuff coming through on the education side as well. Social welfare highlights. We've seen the electricity credit that everybody got last year come back. This time it's reduced. It's reduced down to €150. It's lower than we were expecting. We were expecting that the 200 might come through. But it is 3 installments, so that we can at least take that on board. We have the double child payment before the year end, and we've got another one then happening in January as well. With carers with disabilities, one-off of €400, the increase in the pensions by the €12 per week, fuel allowance, one-off 300, and living alone. These are the highlights. There's plenty in there, but it's just kind of give an idea of what's happening, what's about, and what are the key points on it. Childcare, as I said at the start of the conversation, basically, it's hugely important for the government. They've made it clear that their policy is to make it the best place in the world to grow up. And from that perspective, they've increased childcare funding by 25%. There was a lot that were hoping that it would go up by 50%. That's where we're getting to the current year. Better paying conditions for the staff in there. There's more state support. The National Childcare Scheme, the hourly subsidised from 140 to 214 effectively in September 2024. Carbon tax, it's gone up. We're going to be seeing it going up. We know that. It's there. It has to happen. It's like everything else. We've got this fine balance between needing more energy, and unfortunately there's been tax there as well on it, and get it right from the environmental side. We can see on the new rate from auto fuels is also going to be increasing. We can see basically from tonight they're expecting the price at the pumps to start going up as well, as we've seen in many a budget over the years. Income tax changes. So we're gone from 40,000 to 42,000 for married. This is where there's just one couple that earning, that goes up to 51,000. Obviously, if both couples are earning, it can go up to 84,000. Like everything else as well, you actually have to go out and get it. So it depends on whether or not your income's up in there. But there's good news there. It's going up. Personal credit's up €100. POE credit's up €100. Earned income's up €100. Basically, home care is up €100. The incapacitated child credit's got €200, and the USC band has changed by €2,840. That's the second band, basically the lower rate of it, and the USC has gone from 4.5 to 4%. So So that's leading to significant income there. Medical card reduced USC band where incomes less than 60k is also there and applicable going forward. So we just did a little analysis in here to see basically where you can spot yourself in the map and where it is based on an income around 45,000 euros. Increased it slightly and all that type of good stuff. Give an idea to everybody where you are, what will you be getting out of the budget. At the start of the slides there, the Minister did have a very specific amount that he had outlined out, but again, it was based on those very specific circumstances, and this is purely just from an income tax perspective so that everybody can get a very quick highlight. We haven't included any of the additional ones in there as we don't have the electricity credit or anything like that in it. Just give an idea. Okay, SME SaaS business, research and development tax credit. Obviously, this is a great credit. It's becoming more and more popular, definitely in the agri sector and all that type of stuff. We're into kind of high-tech farming and all that type of good stuff, food and agri, etc. So it's becoming more and more applicable. So we've moved from 20 to 30% in the current year, which is good. But we're also into the new scheme where effectively that 25,000 to 50,000 can all be claimed in year one. One time has always been spread over the 3 years. So there's a little bit, becoming a more powerful relief, a lot more popular relief, and it is putting cash back into small businesses too that are doing work there. Film relief, we can see it's gone up. It's been massively increased, basically to 125 million from 70 million. Again, it's there, but I think most people in this won't come across it too much. Micro generation electricity, so this is the solar panels that are sitting on your house and all that type of good stuff. It's gone from 200 euro to 400 euros. There's been a lot of uncertainty about this. A lot of people have gone out and got solar grants and put this on top of their house, and this is just from the personal owner's perspective. That income that's been earned, revenue is regarded as taxable income. So what they're saying is, well, if you're a POE worker and you're earning that 400 euros a year, that you're going to be getting that tax credit from it. But it's like everything else, as it was 400 euros exemption on the income. But again, to keep an eye on it, and technically it should be going into your income tax return if you're going above the 400 euros. Just to remind the people on the TAMs and all that type of good stuff, there is an argument there to say that they're not allowed to be selling any energy back to the grid, so they may not be applicable to them. The SME relief. So we have a new relief for angel investors. Basically, a reduced rate of CGT for gains arising from the disposal of certain qualifying investments. Again, it's going to be what details and what's in the T&Cs that ultimately come out when we get the actual budget bill, as in the finance bill. But it'll be interesting to see what's qualifying, what are the requirements from it, and all that type of stuff. And the EII from 1st of January, the minimum holding period to obtain the relief has been standardised to 4 years for all investments. The limit on the amount of the investor on the claim for such investment has been increased to 500,000. The EII, basically, it's becoming a pillar of tax, basically, for startups and all that type of good stuff where they're getting investments into them. It can be a very complicated area, so any simplification of it is welcomed by all. So when we're just coming and looking at specifically to the farmer sector, young trained farmers in succession, so the maximum relief that an individual can get under this scheme has gone from 70 to 100,000. It's welcomed by all. That's more of a change at EU level, but it's welcome that we see it. We also see stock relief increasing from 15 to 20,000 euros a year. With the good and true stamp duty relief been increased for another 5 years out. So that's going to be our stamp duty and 1% on family transfers of farms. It's only applicable to farmers. It's great to see this extended out. There's been a lot of lobbying by a lot of organisations to get it out there. It's a welcome one. It's very nice. Everybody understands it. And I'm not going to go into any more detail, but it's nice to see that we're going to have it for at least another 5 years. The land lease exemption. There's a new requirement that's come in there for 7 years to own the land, and there's also a possibility that you might have farmed it for 7 years as well. Now, I wouldn't put too much faith in it yet. Take it with a pinch of salt. We're waiting more on the actual finance bill to clarify exactly what the additional requirements are, but once we know, we'll definitely be posting it up and you'll see our articles and things like that coming out. Farm allowance. We've accelerated the capital allowances here on the farm safety equipment. 50% eligible is being extended to 31 December. It's like everything else. Safety on farms is paramount. And we push once again, that is there. Energy efficient equipment. So as we're buying more and more efficient equipment going onto the farm and all that type of stuff, a lot of it, if it's on the approved list, it's 100% capital allowances in year one. That means we're not doing the traditional, take their deduction over that 8 years. It's basically all up here, but it up in the first year, but we have to make sure that it is on that approved list. The tax incentive for companies and unincorporated business who invest highly in EII is being extended out for another 2 years. The Agri Farm Succession. So this was an interesting one that was flagged through in the budget. Is from the 1st of January 2025, but effectively the retirement age limit is going from 65 to 70. So this would have always been referred to retirement leave. And traditionally, what happened is if you were giving land, land that was being farmed from a parent to a child, that between 55 and 66, it would have been exempt from CGT. Now, under the new scheme, what they're saying is we're going to be pushed out to 70. Okay, under the old scheme, it was unlimited between 55 and 65, effectively. But now that's going to go to a 10 million euro cap. And then there was a balance of 3 million once you went above 66. We're not sure where the balance is going above that and all that type of good stuff, but we're hoping that we'll get a better understanding when we see the finance bill. But we've also got the expansion of the Group B threshold from foster parents. So this is a child that's been fostered, that to be able to use the Group B threshold from their foster parents, because this is normally only allowable where people are blood relations. That's what we normally refer to the Group B threshold as. So just kind of other miscellaneous points that we've seen there. We've got the bank levy coming in. It's been long promised. There's been a lot of talk about it over the years, but now we actually see that it's been budgeted in within the finance, within the budget bill. So we've the deficit concrete products levy no longer applied to the pouring of concrete used to manufacture precast products and the funds. So unpopular scheme when it came in last year, but at least we can see a little bit of pullback on it. There's also the heritage items there, where effectively if you're donating to the Irish collections, you get a credit equal 80% of the market value of the item donated. That can be used against CGT gains, it can be used against income tax and all those type of good stuff. Cool. That's just a very high level overrun of what we've seen in the budget today. There'll be lots more commentary in a couple of days as we get more and more clarity, and ultimately when the actual finance bill itself coming out, we'll be doing a little bit more kind of a chat on it when we know the specifics of those schemes.
Great, thanks a million for that, Marty. I suppose we might take one or two questions, Marty, and then we'll throw it off to Darren, and I'll come back to more questions for you at the end. And of course, folks, just remember we have the Q&A function that you can input your questions for Marty and Darren as we go along. So Marty, one of the first ones that's in, if I inherit lands from parents and farmed them before, let's say before getting them, before inheriting them, when can I get the income tax leasing exemption?
Well, put it this way, we're waiting for the actual Finance Act to see what's within it. But under our understanding at the moment, it's basically you would have to have owned the land for 7 years. So you would have to have the land in your own name and have farmed it for 7 years. If it's in your parents' name and it hasn't been transferred to you yet, you haven't started the clock ticking. Technically, as the scheme is only technically approved out for 5 years, you may never qualify for it. But let's see how the legislation evolves, etc.
Very good. Can mortgage interest relief be claimed on more than one property, or do we know that yet?
It's quite unlikely, as the ministers have kind of broken it down, that you actually have to be living in the property and all that good stuff, and that's where your principal private residence. Now, it's like everything else, subject to what happens in the actual Finance Act / bill itself, but it's basically stay tuned.
Okay, so, and basically on the mortgage relief, like you said, Marty, it's for people who have had a mortgage and kind of had the, the interest rate relief increase in the year. It's not going to encourage anybody basically to take out a mortgage.
It's not designed for anybody who's taken out a mortgage. It's more kind of the age profile that would have got the tracker rates back in the day where their mortgages have gone up quite substantially. There is the younger individuals who will be refinancing this year. A lot of people get their mortgage on fixed, 3, 4, 5 years, and they will be seeing a little bit, but I don't think they'll be getting a huge benefit from. It'll be more the tracker rates.
Perfect. I suppose, Darren, we might pop over to you then, and Marty will come back to more questions for yourself, let's say, after Darren. So I suppose, just to give an overview of Darren again, Darren is the Sheep and Schemes Editor with the Irish Farmers Journal, and he's specialising in market analysis and technical coverage across both the sheep and beef sectors. I suppose Darren is probably well known through everyone within the industry. He's a sheep and suckler farmer and also spent a bit of time as an advisor with Teagasc. So I suppose, Darren, how do you then feel the budget was perceived this evening?
Good evening, Niamh. I suppose if you were to look at the way or the headline that the Department of Agriculture press release information came out and compare that to last year, in 2022 for the 2023 budget, there was a lot of fanfare. Minister McConalogue was announcing delivering a 13% increase in the budget, whereas this year the headline was that he's prioritising farm incomes. So it very much was a budget of trying to hold what was there, trying to hold the current schemes that is there, and we haven't seen too much new funding coming into it. We've seen a lot of funding in recent years coming into agriculture through the Brexit Adjustment Reserve or through some COVID measures that I suppose every sector of society got. Agriculture would have got a small chunk of that as well. All of that is phased out. So if you were to look at this budget, you'd say overall there has been a reduction in overall spending. Core spending on, say, farm schemes of that has gone slightly up, but there's been no surprises in it. And there's been very, I suppose, new initiatives. A lot of farmers might have been hoping for something given or coming through a period of extraordinary high input costs. I won't, I suppose I won't put out a pessimistic view at the beginning, but if anyone is expecting something to jump out in the next few slides, unfortunately, that won't be coming in this budget. So if we look at the importance of, I suppose, why so many people are interested in the agricultural budget, and if you look there, say, on the left of your screens around direct payments as a percentage of family farm income for 2022, you'll see that it has a huge impact on the, say, what the level of money every farmer takes in from, say, the budget, or whether it be from the CAP strategic plan, whatever farm scheme it is, has a huge impact. If you look there on cattle rearing farms in 2022, it made up 152% of income, and sheep farms 110% of income, cattle farms 86%. It's lowest on the dairy and tillage farms in 2022, but if you were to fast forward to 2023, it would be a lot higher percentage given where the escalation of input costs, the reduction in grain prices, and also the reduction in milk prices. So this year's budget is really, really important. If you look at the other side of the screen, it just gives a flavour, I suppose, on that BPS is still the most important, I suppose, contributor to direct payments. But outside of that, you have all the schemes that are influenced by today's budget, like the BPS, which is now the beef welfare scheme. Organics is becoming an increasing scheme. Acres has replaced glass. Forestry has been a bit of a non-starter in recent years. Straw incorporation measure has been important. That's not affected by today's budget. ANC, similar. And the sheep welfare, and we had another scheme there, REAP, in the middle of that. So if you look over, I suppose, the last 18 months in particular, that was the core of our schemes for maybe 5 or 6 years, but there's been a lot of add-on schemes, some of which has fallen by the wayside today that we'll go through. This is slides that were developed by a colleague of mine, Lurkin Walsh Kelly. Some of this evening's viewers will have seen them last week. On the left-hand side there, he had up to 2023 figures shown, I suppose, where the budget allocation was. And that's where I talked about the 13% increase in 2023. Some of that came from the Brexit Adjustment Reserve. Given that the funding for that is ending on the 31st of December, there's no funding or very little funding accounted in this year's budget, and you can see that there by the reduction in the red line on top of the blue line. So essentially you have 240 million that was coming into the sector. A lot of that, to be fair, was going to fisheries and food, but on the agriculture side, or on the livestock side, it would have supported the National Beef Welfare Scheme, the National Dairy Beef Welfare Scheme, the new genotyping program. So that is a significant loss. If you look at the other side of your screen and see the allocation across key areas, and this is what I suppose I talked about earlier on, that there was a budget of trying to maintain or trying to keep spending, and across key allocation areas, you're seeing that the spending has reduced. Food safety, animal health and welfare from 383 million down to 376 million. Policy and strategy, 15 million reduction. And the farm sector supports and control, you see a significant reduction on that. And that has come at the expense of some schemes that will not continue, that we've seen maybe brought in to try and bring us through the extraordinary circumstances that we've had with input costs, with the war in Ukraine, and also with COVID. So we've seen a sort of phasing out of a lot of those measures. It's important too to highlight at the outset the figure or the slide I put up there 2 slides ago around BPS being the main payment. And this is a question we get every year when we go through the budget slides. The basic income support for sustainability, or the 1.2 billion in EU funds circulated via the department to Irish farmers, that had nothing, or wasn't influenced by today's, announcements. Now, there is huge changes under the basic income support for sustainability from the basic payment scheme as we know it. We've talked before about the CRIS, we've talked about Eco Scheme, we've talked about convergence going from 60% to 85%, but all of that is happening outside of today. BPS was now based as an EU drive payment. It's not affected by today's payments, and the payments are set for 2023 to 2027. For some farmers that have I suppose are going to be challenged by a significant cut in their payments, today's budget will be more important. But in general, we have to park that for a second. The same way as the areas of natural constraint, we're looking at, say, that 250 million in funding paid to almost 100,000 farmers. The biggest change on that this year has been the change in payment date. And it to be fair, it has had an impact on farm income, and it has had an impact. We've seen it even through the March trade. Payments would always come ploughing week. Payments are due to come the 17th of October. I think it's right of us to mention that this evening. Payments under the basic income support for sustainability will come on the 24th of October for the main or the core part of this, and for eco schemes on the following week, the 31st of October. But to go back to this evening, and the ANC fundings will remain also at that for the foreseeable future. The only thing that might change in the budget around ANC is if the department decide to put more national exchequer funding in the years ahead. But as we are, there's no changes today to the areas of natural constraint. Getting into the schemes that have been affected by today's budget, and the big one, or the big ticket item that there's been a lot of discussions on, really I suppose for the last year, is around Agri-Climate Rural Environment Scheme, or ACRES, which is commonly known. So there's been a 40 million increase in funding to bring funding up to 200 million for 2024. A lot of that has been, I suppose, maybe in programme funding. So the increase in places from ACRES, if we think back to this time last year, there was meant to be 30,000 places for ACRES. That was subsequently increased to 46,000 places, with all farmers accepted into the programme. Very, very welcome at the time. Minister McConlogue was out of the traps very quick and said in the days after that he was going to try and fight for more funds, because he wanted to come back to the table this year with an increased number of places. And I think there has been an increase in anticipation over recent months that would have taken place. Unfortunately, that's one of the areas today that there is a bit of disappointment over. So that 40 million in funding, if you were to look at the average of 6,000, say, of an average payment across farms, so that's 7,000 across the corporation and just over 5,000 across the general entry route, it could deliver in excess of 6,500 places. The one outstanding question that is not known is this: is the 40 million, does that 2024 funding need to cover non-productive investments that have opened in recent weeks? By what I mean for non-productive investments is farmers in cooperation areas, or that have entered through the cooperation entry route, of which there's about 18,000. They have the opportunity to top up their payments if they're at the maximum payment from 7,500 to 10,500 by taking on investments that will improve I suppose the scores over the next few years. So it could be something along the lines of erecting fencing to improve water quality, making landscape changing, bringing in, I suppose, maybe different animals and fencing for that. If you're bringing in cattle into an upland area as opposed to sheep, all those side of things. So we don't have oversight in that. And early indications would point that it will probably stick to the 50,000 places. That seemed to be the word we were getting this evening, from the Minister's office, and in all the correspondence that came out, that 50,000 figure has been used. If that is the case, the 6,500 places I've talked about above will be restricted to 3,500 to 4,000 places. So we're looking at, I suppose, maybe a lower anticipation, and I think you're going to see a huge oversubscription again. I would have said that you're probably looking at maybe up to 60,000 farmers as a whole looking for a place in acres. So there will be a bit of a struggle there, and it will be interesting to see when the scheme opens. We're told it'll open towards the end of October, November. Training for tranche 2 has just started at the moment. So it'll be interesting to see if there is any changes around the priority criteria. So there was a tier 1, tier 2 and tier 3 in tranche 1, but that wasn't enacted. And the funding for acres, a lot of it is coming from carbon tax. Government have got quite a lot of mileage out of, I suppose, announcing the 1.5 billion in carbon tax allocation that was going to be there up to 2030. A lot of that is being targeted to acres, and we're seeing the carbon tax allocation for 2024 increase by 32 million to 113 million. That allocation, I think, will increase next year again when you have more farmers coming into it, and we'll probably see it hold steady then for the next few years as that scheme stays at that sort of 50,000 places, unless there's any big changes depending on the number of applications received. Next big ticket item, the National Beef Welfare Scheme, funding for 23 million available for that this year. So there's 20 million for a beef scheme for 2024. That may be a continuation of the National Beef Welfare Scheme, or it could be a similar scheme to replace it. Minister McConalogue on these notes that he sent out to media this evening, one of the big ticket items that he said was that he would deliver 200 euros per cow and 20 euros per ewe from budget 2024. I suppose the devil will be in the detail again in this, because I would think with funding of 20 million, we're going to see a front-loaded payment rate of possibly up to 50 euros per cow to hit that target of 200 euros per cow. So if we look at the current National Beef Welfare Scheme, there's a front-loaded payment roughly of about 50 euros for the first 20 cows in the herd. If somebody is availing or participating in the IBR aspect of it, I'll talk about that in a second. But if you were to go above and beyond 20 cows, and in particular go above and beyond 40 cows, very quickly your level of funding was diluted. So it'll be interesting to see when the exact, I suppose, details come on that. The difference here is that it's National Exchequer funding for 2024 versus the BAR funding. That should say 2023 there, apologies, instead of 2022. There is lower funding, it should be pointed out. So if we look at the funding, it's 3 million lower, but there's also lower uptake. And if you look at the table on the side of the screen there for a second, we've seen a significant reduction in the amount of farmers participating, or the amount of farmers putting in application in recent years. So if we looked at 2021 and 2022, you had a fund of about 40 million. There was another element within what was the BEPS scheme at the time, or the Beef Environmental Efficiency Payment, and that was to do with weighing, and that's provided for payments of up to 80 to 90 euros per cow. There was also other elements around vaccination or fecal egg counts, and that's why we've seen such a big uptake. But you'd have to say that the number of participants that joined in the 2023 scheme has been below expectations, partly due to the reduced payment. But I would think that a significant issue had to be as well the IBR, the inclusion of IBR testing. It's something that didn't go down well among farmers. There was a lot of confusion around it that definitely didn't help the scheme, and I would be doubtful if we'll see a return of IBR in any future programme. It's also important to say that it's an annual scheme. It has no link to the Circular Carbon Efficiency Programme. And I think the fact that it has been an annual scheme in recent years, or that the BPS was a help for farmers that didn't want to commit to another 5-year programme. But look, we've 20 million there for now. There's no measures as of yet decided. You would think that the meal feeding component would be a mainstay of any scheme going forward. It's a firm favourite of farmers. It's also something that has delivered on animal welfare side, so you would imagine that that'd be included going forward. This is a new scheme, a new sheep scheme, very welcome from the sheep sector. 15 million in funding allocated, €8 per ewe payment. So the €20 per ewe that I talked about, say, there a few minutes ago, being delivered, it's the €12 in the sheep improvement scheme, and it's €8 per ewe thereafter. That's the €20 that the department are talking about delivering. For anybody that's not in the sheep improvement scheme, you're looking at the option of going in for a 1-year scheme for an €8 per ewe payment. It's let out to cover over 1.8 million of the 2.6 million national ewe flock, and that's going on, I suppose, the uptake in the grassland sheep scheme or the sheep improvement scheme. It has generally fluctuated around the 1.8 to 1.85, 1.8 million ewes in recent years, and I'd say you're probably not looking at figures being too dissimilar to that. There's nothing announced yet, but we're told the scheme is likely to follow a similar format to the National Beef Welfare Scheme. In essence, what we're told, it will be paid on the completion of a number of yet to be agreed measures or actions. There's a lot of talk around those actions in recent weeks and months. Some of the possible actions being touted is being support for shearing. We're seeing a lot of, I suppose, maybe talk around shearing given the low value of wool. Maybe the potential for support for store lambs for coming off hill farms. That is a sector that really needs support given the huge challenges that's there in recent times with low market prices. And also you'd imagine that there will be some health measures being considered. But I would imagine we're not going to see any more news around this for a few weeks. I'd say that the department will probably meet farm organisations. I know there's work being done behind the scenes around maybe what formulation of funds or what formulation of actions could be taken on. And also this will probably have to get approval. It'll be an annual payment, a 1-year contract. And a question that's sure to be on the lips of a lot of farmers is how will it be based, or how will it, what ewe numbers, and it's likely to be based on historical ewe numbers. No, that's if it is a measure that is linked to ewe numbers, or the probably more common or the probably more realistic option is that it'll be based on completion of an action, so there won't be any link to ewe numbers unless it's required for an overall payment side of things. Organic farming scheme, this was taken out or highlighted today in the Minister Paschal Donoghue's speech during the day, that there was 57 million for organic farming in 2024. That's not new funds in essence, where a lot of that is coming from is programme funds. So there's 20 million say being allocated from the CAP strategic plan. If we remember back to last year, there's 256 million allocated over 5 years. There's no figures yet as of what that 20 million will deliver. But if we look at, say, the average payments or what has come in, I'd say you're probably looking at 1,000 more applications coming into organics when it opens in the coming months. The department have ambitious targets of having 7.5% of lands farmed organically by 2027 and 10% by 2030. So what I would say to farmers here is that if you are interested in organics, it's probably one area where we'll see, if it is oversubscribed, a good push to try and get more numbers into it. So I'd say if you're interested, get your application in. If we see there in the bottom funding growth, like there's 256 million from 2023 to 2027. And on the right-hand side, or it's on your left-hand side of the screen, you'll probably see that there has been a big increase in organic funding, and that is going to continue to grow in years to come. There's 4,000 participants in it at the moment. 3,423 of those were to the new organic farming scheme. There was 2,000 brand new participants last year, and I would expect that there is big interest, particularly from hill sheep farmers. We're seeing a lot of interest from hill sheep farmers and more extensive beef farmers, and I think that is something that's going to continue going forward. Just looking at why there's so much interest, there is no details yet around the organic farming scheme, say what it will entail when it opens. But there's also nothing to suggest that it would change anything from what was in place last year when it opened. And if you look at the payment rates there for dry stock farmers, €300 per hectare, up to a higher area of 70 hectares, €60 per hectare thereafter, €250 when you're fully converted. Look at say the horticulture side, €800, dairy 350, tillage 320. So there is quite, I suppose you'd say, positive figures. But that goes back to what sector you're in. So for dry stock, it is very, very appealing at the moment when you look at this. Over 100% of family farm income in some cases is coming from direct payments. On the tillage side, it's not as appealing unless we grow our demand for feed coming from those organic farms. On the dairy side, we've seen that the price of conventional milk was ahead of organics last year. That stifled interest. With milk prices coming back, that could generate an increase from some dairy farmers. And what also helped it was the participation payment of €2,000 in the first year and €1,400 per annum thereafter, and also the higher rate of grant aid under TAMS of 60% was a real, I suppose, benefit as well. So I think we're going to continue to see increased interest in organics going forward. National Dairy Beef Welfare Scheme, there was 5 million allocated for the last 4 years per year. Really interesting that in 2023, it was the first year where we've seen, I suppose, maybe a surge in applications, or that the total funding is going to be drawn down. So we had 14,383 applicants. If we go back to 2022 and 2021, you'd only 6,500. 2020, the first year of the scheme, there was a little over 8,000. So really, in recent years, you've only gone from utilising 2 to 3.5 million. I think a big, I suppose, contributor to the increase in uptake has been the maximum payment has increased for the last few years. We've gone to the current payment this year is €20 on 50 calves. That's 10 calves up on last year. So that has been a big benefit. We're told that there may be a linear cut if the scheme is oversubscribed. I presume that will stay the case going forward, but the department have allocated that, say, $1.5 million extra to take account of that, and that they're seeing that this will continue. I would say that there's big support for this scheme going forward, given the, I suppose, the challenges at farm level or discussions around animal welfare, and particularly if there's any, say, pressure on the live exports of calves. It's something that is targeted towards the rearer of calves, or the person that's rearing calves. He gets paid €20 per calf in return for recording weights. I don't think there's probably going to be any change in that, but that is still to be decided. We've been given no indications of what's in it, but it's a scheme that's working, or seems to be working this year, so I don't think will change too much. A lot of questions this evening around tillage. So there's 8 million allocated, but that's as far as the information goes. So if we go back to the last 2 years, or the last 2 budgets, there would have been 10 million allocated under the tillage incentive scheme. There's no sight of that this evening. So it won't be a case where we have 8 million allocated in a new scheme and the tillage incentive scheme going forward. That 8 million will either, I think, be fed into replacing the tillage incentive scheme, whether that is a scheme that holds similar in nature. But I think that 8 million is a replacement of that tillage incentive scheme, which you'd have to say has been successful in recent years. If we look at the funding in 2022, there was 10.94 million paid across 27,369 hectares. And that came from quite, I suppose, maybe positive payment of €400 per hectare for land inter-tillage from grassland. The reason I think why the funding has gone back to 8 million is that I don't think the 10 million allocated in the 2023 budget is going to be all drawn down, because we're going to see more land fall into the category of €200 per hectare to retain land which inter-tillage under the scheme in 2022. That was for eligible crops for barley, wheat, oats, rye, oilseed rape, maize, fodder, sugar beet. Protein crops were supported under the protein aid scheme, so they didn't come under the tillage incentive scheme. So I'd say, look, we've yet to see details. I think we'll probably see more details coming in the coming days, but it isn't a case where we're going to have a 10 million tillage incentive scheme along with another 8 million. This 8 million is what seems to be there for tillage at the moment. A lot of developments on the TAM side. So there's a 70% grant for slurry storage talked about this evening. That's the budget measure highlighted to support irrigation farmers. So a few weeks ago, Minister Paschal Donoghue would have said at the ploughing that there was going to be something for the irrigation farmers. This seems to be it. It's not going to target the irrigation farmers directly. What it appears is it's grant aid for farmers who import slurry to increase slurry storage, and in turn that's seen to be a way of alleviating the pressure on stocking rates in irrigation farms. We did a few figures, when I say we did a few figures, Marty Murphy, our buildings specialist, did some figures on it this evening, and his sort of analysis is it will be highly dependent on a low-cost storage options. So if we're looking at, say, initial analysis, or if you're looking at putting in a lot of concrete tanks, you're looking at a return of investment for 7 to 10 years to materialise or to cover the cost, and that's coming from taking the current value of, say, slurry storage, taking the current times reference costs, taking in costs of the value of slurry, the value of spreading slurry. So it will be something that will suit some farmers, but it will take, I suppose, it won't be for everyone. It will require EU approval, and the grant aid increase of 30% is for the standard application, and 10% versus, say, young farmer scheme. So at the moment it's 40% for standard slurry storage, 60% for young farmers, so it's on top of that. And that's something that we will see more details coming in the coming weeks. There is also another TAMS change, or say proposal. So the department or the minister is proposing to bring in a new ceiling for storing organic manures. This would be a separate ceiling similar to what's there for less equipment or for the solar capital investment scheme. So in essence, is if you had a farmer that was putting up a new shed, there'd be a separate ceiling for the slurry storage, and the actual physical structure or everything above ground would come under the animal welfare and nutrient storage scheme. It's a big change to the existing terms and conditions, where you're very closely aligned to current numbers on farms. So what the department are saying is that this will allow slurry storage beyond regulatory compliance. There's a lot of pressure on slurry storage, and we're going to see that coming with new soil water measures coming into play this year. Say farmers are going to have increased slurry storage for that. The grant aid talked about is 40% standard rate of grant aid and 60% for young farmers and female farmers. This will also require EU approval, and it's something that it will, I suppose, maybe take a bit of time to bed in. I don't think you're going to see an immediate introduction of this, particularly if we require EU approval and there has to be a change to the existing terms and conditions. But it is something that is welcome for farmers that are under pressure to increase slurry storage in the coming years. National Farm Safety Measure, there's 2.5 million allocated in budget 2024. Why I have the picture of a quad and the quad helmet and Minister Hayden with the say PTO covers is that the current scheme is still open. So the current scheme, there was announced in budget 2023, whereby you can get grant aid of up to €90 on the purchase of 2 ATV or quad helmets of a value of up to €150, or up to €60 aid on the purchase of 4 PTO shaft covers up to €90 cost per cover. That is still open at the minute. Now it's closing soon. There's a closing date of the 31st of October 2023, both to apply and also to submit a payment claim. It's unlikely, I imagine, that whatever announcement is going to be there, or whatever scheme for 2024 is going to follow in a similar pattern. I'd say the funds that are there are probably going to be exhausted on the existing scheme. So if you are interested in the quad helmets or on the PTO covers, I wouldn't be waiting for 2024. I'd make that application now. There's also an added or a continuation of the accelerated capital allowance for the wear and tear of farm safety equipment. So under the normal taxation measures, farm safety wear and tear is 12.5% over 8 years, but the accelerated capital allowance allowing 50% per annum, or say an investment to be written off over 2 years, that is going to continue for 2024, and that is a good element to see as well. Multi-species swards red clover scheme is included. There is no budget outlaid in what we've seen this evening. There's 2.5 million funding in 2023. I imagine it'll be something broadly similar. No also information around the scheme metrics. We've seen these change quite considerably over the last 2 years. So last year you were looking at the purchase of say a bag of seed, and the co-op or the merchant was receiving the payment of €50 per bag. The funding was increased substantially to €300 per hectare this year. There was almost 17,000 hectares established in 2022. We've seen no figure for 2023, but I imagine it will be at least similar given the payment rates there. So it's a good one to see that for people that are interested in it, particularly in light of the pressure on fertiliser cost. National Alignment Scheme is discontinued under Budget 2024. So this was brought in last year with 8 million in funds. The reason I'm just going to spend a minute on it is because it's still open in essence. So 41,000 applications was submitted, 72 million in funding was requested. Budget was doubled to 16 million to allow up to 40 tonnes per applicant. Now there was a change made on that in recent weeks. So under previously, the previous deadline was all lime had to be purchased up to the 40 tonnes by the 31st of October and the payment submission made. In light of challenging ground conditions, the purchase of lime is you still have to purchase by 31st of October and make a submission to payment claim. So that's really important to remember, but you have up until the 31st of March to actually apply the lime. So that's just something that is important to be mindful of, but no new funding in Budget 2024 for that. Fodder support scheme wasn't mentioned in any of the correspondence put out, but we have confirmation from the department that there's no new funding for 2024. There is funding in Budget 2024, but it's already forward spent. So farmers would have received an advance payment totaling 30 million in December 2022, or it was 57% of your allocation. So in 2022, there was 56 million paid out, slightly fewer applicants in 2024. But in essence, farmers will get the top up in payment at the end of this year, but no new funding going forward. It is something that farmers will also feel that sort of cash boost, particularly if fertiliser costs remain high, which they're predicted to do for 2024. Only a couple of more slides. BVD tag scheme. This hasn't been mentioned anywhere. There was 2.25 million allocated for 2023. That allowed €2 per calf up to a maximum of 20 calves, or €50 per herd for calves born between the 1st of August 2022 and 31st of July 2023. I think we're going to hear a lot about this in the coming weeks, because there's a lot of pressure coming from farm organisations that the department would put their hand to their pocket and cover a greater chunk of the cost, given that some farmers are 12 or 13 years now covering BVD status, and it was seen that we would be moving towards, I suppose, an ending in tissue tagging. So that's something we're going to hear more of, but no confirmation on it. 3 billion Climate and Nature Fund, huge figure here. So 3.15 billion will be made available between 2026 and 2030. This was included today in a Green Party press release. There's very little information on it. I picked out two things from it. The funds will focus primarily on capital projects that will help to cut Ireland's use of fossil fuels, retrofit our public and private building stock, help business decarbonise and restore nature across Ireland. Funds will begin allocating in 2026, where if you look at just agriculture and focus, what's seen is restore our natural habitats. I think this funding is going to be targeted at nature restoration law, improve water quality, reintroduce once common species, and it's going to remove barriers that stop fish swimming up seas. Roundup of other measures very quickly. Forestry programme, we heard a lot about this in the last few weeks, 110 million allocated for 2024. Planting targets still falling behind, and there's going to be a drive to try and increase the level of afforestation. Really welcome to see 14 million allocated for horticulture. No detail on that, only that 3 million is advance payments to producer organisations under EU-funded schemes for the fruit and vegetable sector. And there's also a mention of the soil sampling pilot. We nearly forgot about this one. 10 million allocated in 2021 and 50 million in 2022. There's funds remaining there. I'm not sure. I estimate shy of 10 million, maybe around 9 million. The department have a target of 90,000 samples over the next 12 to 18 months. Just to make one mention, again, that the top line figures for BIS is separate to everything that happened today. So all of them schemes that are there over the next few years, they are separate. And also most other schemes that would have been brought in, say, along with the CAP strategic plan, they are also separate to the funding that's there today. So that's me for now.
Super. Thanks a million for that, Darren. Very comprehensive. I suppose, look, I'll just throw some of the questions that are coming in and I'll just go between the two of you if that's okay. So, Marty, to give Darren's voice a little bit of a break, the first one's up. Does the Help to Buy scheme include second-hand properties?
No, it doesn't. Again, when I was doing my slides, I mentioned that actually we were hoping that there might be some movement there, but there hasn't been.
And I suppose, Marty, another one just for you. What are the benefits of the retirement relief changes in respect of the upper age limit being extended to 70 years of age?
So effectively, we're extending it out. So traditionally what happened is once we got to 66, the threshold fell down to 3 million when it was going to a child. How it works now, at least according to this, without going into the detail on it, is effectively under 66, it used to be unlimited. Now it'll be 10 million, but it'll be going up to 70. So we're going to be getting an additional 4 to 5 years, depending on what the wording in the actual finance comes through on.
Okay, very good. Darren, kind for yourself, does the TAMS cover slurry storage for farms beyond regulatory compliance with the nitrate certification, i.e. modernisation of storage infrastructure? Am I right in thinking no extra rate of grant for slurry storage?
Yeah, you broke up slightly for me there, Niamh, but I think I got the question. Yes, so it would go over and above nitrates is what we're led to believe. Now, we've only seen, I suppose, a very provisional look at this, and I think that it is there, say, it seems to be the first sort of move, and it's a big move away from, say, up to now, you would have only been allowed the slurry storage for the animals you have, but I think this is trying to condition farmers to have more slurry storage, and I think it's tying into a lot of, I suppose, maybe concerns around water quality or sort of safeguarding Irish agriculture to be able to maybe hold slurry or to be able to maybe deal better with weather going forward. But from what I understand is, yes, that it would go above the nitrates, say, for this season. Now, I don't think there's going to be changes in other elements of TAMS. And we don't know what ceiling will be pushed towards this. So the big question that's going to come is how much you can spend under this ceiling, because I think the other TAMS regulations are going to stay the same. So if there's a small ceiling in this, it might limit farmers to as of how much extra above statutory they can put in. But look, I think it's a welcome if there's anything there at all to provide a bit of allowance or leeway.
Perfect. Thanks, Darren. Marty, so just back to yourself, I suppose, how much of an increase in state aid has there been for young trained farmers? And then has the age limit on young trained farmer relief on the transfer been extended also?
No, so 35 is still the age limit. and we've gone from 70,000 of a maximum to 100,000, so effectively up to €1 million worth of land at 1%.
Perfect. Darren, will SCEP open for new applicants next year?
I'd be pessimistic around SCEP opening, particularly that it was I won't say oversubscribed, but the initial funding allocated is probably going to be exceeded, given there was a higher than anticipated level of applications. So I'd say funding probably has been exhausted. The one area where it might open for is new say trained farmers, but I don't think you're going to see a general opening, Niamh. I think that if it does open, it'll be very much limited to new entrants, I think.
Okay, super. Marty, what is the tax saving in respect of the landlord rental relief?
Effectively, how it's working is the first €3,000, they're going to say, well, that would be basically they're going to take €3,000 out of your flat rate, and that's not going to be subject to income tax. So it works out at about €600.
Okay, brilliant. Darren, is there any further aid for tillage in today's budget?
Doesn't seem to be, Niamh. Now, I suppose the aid that would have been announced under the exceptional aid measures last week, that's separate to today's funding, but there doesn't, from what I see and from early discussions this evening, is that it is the 8 million that there's no further funding, and I'd say that probably will remain the case. I don't think it's going to be a case tomorrow where we've overlooked something and that 8 million is in addition to the TIS. I'd say that 8 million is what it is.
Great. So just the last few questions that are after coming in. Marty, I'm over 35. Can I get consultant? God, I can't even read that. Can I? Is it consultancy relief if I am gifted farmland?
Consanguinity relief. Consanguinity relief.
Lovely.
Effectively, it'll stay at 1%. It doesn't matter that if you're over 35. That's why we always say never rush the decision. Getting it to 0% is fantastic, but the worst case is only 1%. And sometimes it's like everything else. It might take a little bit of time, and it's worth paying the tax for that time. I didn't get the second part of the question there, Niamh.
So the last part, Marty, for yourself is, has the agricultural relief been reduced to 80%, or is it still the same?
No, it's still the same. It's still at 90%. It's long been discussed that it might go down to 80%. It was 75 way back in the day, but it's been a long time, and we don't see any movement on it. So it's still 90%.
Very good. Darren, I suppose one in my line of business that's in here, any incentives to join the National Genomics Scheme in the budget today?
No, other than say there's 5 million say allocated to continue or to roll it out. So the funding that's there, say up to now would have came for the Brexit Adjustment Reserve. The 5 million that has been announced today is just a continuation of that say National Genomics Programme. That, as you know, is closed for dairy farmers. It's open until the end of the month for suckler farmers. We're hearing that numbers are possibly around sort of 5,000-6,000 suckler farmer mark. So there is still potential to take in a lot more suckler farmers. And I'd say that you're not going to see anything around, say, payment rates. Conditions are going to stay the exact same. It's still the, say, €6 per calf, probably cost above and beyond animals that are in SCEP and that type of thing.
Very good. Okay, that seems to be all the questions we've in for this evening. I suppose, Darren, to you, from a farming point of view, if I'm a farmer this evening after 2024 budget, am I happy? Am I like, okay, certain things, not much? What am I kind of feeling from a general overall sense this evening, do you think?
Yeah, I think there was probably an anticipation or an expectation that we would have seen more places in acres. I think that's one of the areas to hone in on. And like that would have come back to even Minister McConaughey's own words, that it was seen as a huge, I suppose, show of commitment to the environment when there was 46,000 applications submitted last year. And like the general reaction straight away was, this is farmers wanting, showing a high environmental ambition. We're going to go back to the drawing board and we're going to see what we can deliver and more places in, say, the acre scheme next year. And I think that will come as I suppose a knock to farmers that maybe hadn't gone into the first acres because that they thought that their plans wouldn't have been maybe assessed, or ranked highly under the tier 1, tier 2 and tier 3 status. Some of those will probably be kicking themselves this evening or will be disappointed. And the other cohort of farmers that you would say that is tillage farmers, that they I suppose are a sector that's under significant pressure at the moment. Look, at all other sectors are under pressure as well, but I think that they have definitely endured a very hard few months and all the challenges that's there on nitrates and land availability. I think that they probably will be disappointed. Sheep farmers will be welcome to see that 15 million euros coming. There was calls for more. There was calls for to try and, I suppose, utilise funding from the Brexit Adjustment Reserve. The way I see it is, it's a start. More that needs to be done to, say, build on that, but definitely it's a welcome. Also welcome to see, say, the beef, say, welfare scheme funding or whatever that funding is going to be used for. But in essence, I think there's farmers that would have been hoping for increased funding or maybe new schemes or maybe a top up in existing payments. We haven't seen that, and it's very much continue as is for the majority of, say, livestock or tillage sector based schemes.
Great. And I suppose, Marty, then from yourself, for the average young family, how does the budget turn out for them? I know there's some kind of, I suppose, the free books, let's say, for secondary schools and different things like that. How does it overall turn out for a young family, let's say?
At the end of the day, in a young family that's been cash strapped and has faced a lot of inflation over the last couple of years, it's a drop in the ocean. Hopefully it'll be a help. The minister is very confident that it'll be a help, but it's like everything else. It's time that's going to tell. There's a lot more support needed there. There's a lot more that has to be done, but it's like everything else. There isn't infinite funds.
Very good. Okay, I'm just conscious that it's 9:10. I know another few questions have come in, but what we might do is follow up with some more of the questions during the week if we haven't gotten back to your question, but Marty and Darren might follow up on them during the week. And if you have any other questions, you can contact either Marty or Darren or the Irish Farmers Journal or IFAC with any of your questions. So look, thanks to both Marty and Darren for giving up their time this evening to give the expertise, advice and all the preparation that they put into it for today. And I'd also like to thank IFAC and the Irish Farmers Journal for having the webinar in conjunction with the Agricultural Science Association. So thank you very much to everyone for tuning in to the Budget 2024 webinar.
Thanks very much.